From fresh evidence of cross-border terror to rising economic hopes, Pakistan and India find themselves at the center of escalating regional tensions, international diplomacy, and critical financial decisions. In a sharp escalation, the Pakistan army has directly accused India of sponsoring cross-border terrorism. At a press briefing, DG ISPR Lieutenant Gen. 𝐂𝐚𝐰𝐬 said India has failed to provide any evidence linking Pakistan to the April 22 Pahalgam attack in Indian-occupied Kashmir, which killed 26 people.
7 days have passed since Pahalgam incident, but so far, there have been no shred of evidence that has been provided to support the baseless allegations being made against Pakistan.
Instead, he claimed Pakistan has irrefutable proof of Indian involvement in terrorism inside its borders, including the recent arrest of a suspect in 𝐒𝐭𝐲𝐬 allegedly trained and funded by India. Recovered items include explosives, cash, and an Indian-origin drone. The general named 4 Indian military officers as being linked to these operations and aired an audio clip allegedly implicating one officer in funding attacks.
जो आपको आज हम एक नेटवर्क की निशानदेही करेंगे और irrefutable एविडेंस पेश करेंगे. This is just one small part of the state-sponsored terrorism that is being prosecuted by India. Now I will request you to draw your attention toward the slides. 25 April, on 25th April, 4 days ago, एक Indian trained, is a Pakistani citizen, Indian trained and sponsored terrorist Abdul Majid was apprehended near Jhelum bus stand. इसके पास से एक आईडी तकरीबन 2.5 kg की बरामद हुई, 2 मोबाइल फोन्स थे जो आप स्क्रीन पे देख सकते हैं एंड 70,000 रुपीस कैश. जब फर्दर इन्वेस्टिगेशन की गई तो उसके घर से एक इंडियन साख्त का ड्रोन बरामद हुआ. इसके अलावा वहां से 10 लाख रुपए कैश बरामद हुआ. उसके मोबाइल फोन्स और बाकी जो चीजें हैं, नेक्स्ट स्लाइड पे जाइएगा, उनकी जब डिटेल इंटेरोगेशन और फोरेंसिक किए गए तो आपके सामने अभी वो तफसीलात हैं, वो एविडेंस है विच इज इर्रिफ्यूटेबल, विच कैन बी एग्जामिन्ड बाय एनी इंडिपेंडेंट एजेंसी, any credible independent agency. On the top right corner you can see ये जो इंडियन ट्रेंड और स्पॉन्सर्ड टेररिस्ट है, दहशतगर्द जो सा है, इसको इसका जो हैंडलर है, आपको उधर नाम नजर आ रहा है, कोड नेम सिकंदर. ही इज बेसिकली ए जूनियर कमीशन ऑफिसर ऑफ इंडियन आर्मी, सूबेदार सखवंदर. So this junior commissioned officer of Indian Army is serving JC of Indian Army. आगे जाइएगा, ये है वो 4 कैरेक्टर. जब उसका फोरेंसिक किया गया, द मेन हैंडलर जो ऊपर सेल को इसके हैंडल कर रहा है, दिस इज ए सर्विंग मेजर संदीप वर्मा, जो कि समीर के नाम से भी आपको लोग पहचानता है. जब मेजर संदीप ऑफ द इंडियन आर्मी ने दहशतगर्द मजीद को हायर किया, तो जस्ट लिसन टू दिस ऑडियो कॉल.
आपकी बात, आप एकदम दुरुस्त बात बोल रहे हैं, बट हम बच्चे तो हम लोग भी नहीं है जी, और जी. पहला काम हो भी नहीं रहा है, ठीक है ना? ठीक. बलूचिस्तान से लेके लाहौर तक मेरा जो नेट है बैठा हुआ है ना? आपको भेज रहा हूँ, ये नहीं भेज रहा हूँ कि मेरा बंदा कॉम्प्रोमाइज हो जाए. अब अभी डायरेक्ट अकाउंट में पैसा नहीं.
He said this proved India's use of drones and financial networks to support terror activity inside Pakistan.
Just hear what is being said by Indian serving major. He is telling कि हम बलूचिस्तान से लेके लाहौर तक दहशतगर्दी करते हैं. वो इंट्री के डिटेल्स बता रहा है, टेरर फाइनेंसिंग कैसे करते हैं. दिस इज हाउ टेरर फाइनेंसिंग इज डन, कि मैं छोटे छोटे टुकड़ों में मुख्तलिफ अकाउंट्स में पैसे भिजवाऊंगा, मैं किसी को भेजूंगा, वो किसी को भेजेगा, किसी के हाथ से आपके तक पहुंचेंगे.
Earlier today, the military also reported shooting down an Indian surveillance drone in the Manavar sector near the line of control in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, the latest in a string of incidents as cross-border firing continued for the 5th consecutive night. Defense Minister 𝐄𝐧𝐬𝐬𝐻 has warned of the risk of an all-out war if hostilities escalate, while Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif reaffirmed Pakistan's call for a neutral international probe into the Pahalgam incident, warning India that any water diversion under the Indus Waters Treaty would be met with full force.
It is underwritten by the World Bank, this treaty. They cannot abandon this treaty just like that. This is a serious blow to the relationship between the two countries. I think India should not be resorting to such measures. This will escalate the situation, and there's a possibility that there is a outbreak of all-out war, which will have serious repercussions not only for our region, for our countries, but rest of the world also.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's Minister for Information Technology Shahzad Fatima 𝐄𝐧𝐬𝐬 confirmed on Tuesday that cyber-attack attempts targeting government ministries were successfully foiled. Speaking to reporters in Islamabad, 𝐄𝐧𝐬𝐬 clarified that while some ministries were targeted, no major breach occurred, and the attempted attacks were resolved promptly.
Ministries के ऊपर आए और मगर they were successfully हम उसको हमने defend किया है, कोई इस तरह का बहुत बड़ा मसला नहीं आया. टेलीकॉम के ऊपर कोई नहीं आया, मगर जो मिनिस्ट्रियल इनके ऊपर वेबसाइट्स वगैरह पे आए हैं उनको टाइमली जो है वो उनको रिजॉल्व किया गया है. पाकिस्तान में आपको पता है एंडसर्ट और प्रोविंशियल सर्ट्स भी बन गए हैं, हमारी एक NTIS भी है.
At the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, Pakistan's envoy Jawad Ajmal linked the deadly March 11 Jafar Express train attack in Balochistan to external sponsorship, an indirect accusation aimed at India.
Pakistan has credible evidence that this attack had external sponsorship from our adversaries in the region.
Ajmal stressed that Pakistan, having lost over 80,000 lives to terrorism, expects global accountability. He urged the international community to distinguish between terrorism and legitimate struggles for self-determination and warned of growing threats through disinformation, dark web networks, and cyber-terrorism.
Madam Chair, for over 2 decades, my country has been one of the worst victims of terrorism. With loss of more than 80,000 precious human lives and thousands injured, we remain inspired by the resilience and strength of our nation. The international community has a responsibility to protect and support the lives of those who have survived from these brutal attacks and the families of victims whose lives change after such tragedies. Equally important is the need to work together to prevent further attacks, holding terrorists and their handlers to account and adopting a uniform victim-centric approach without selectivity while addressing the challenges faced in conflict zones.
Pakistan is now preparing to challenge India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty at multiple global forums. Minister of State for Law Akhil Malik confirmed that legal options are being finalized, including cases at the World Bank, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, and possibly the UN Security Council. Islamabad has called the treaty, signed in 1960, vital to its agriculture and power needs, warning that any attempt to block Pakistan's water share would be seen as an act of war. In occupied Kashmir, Indian authorities have shut down over half of all tourist sites following the Pahalgam attack. According to an official order, 48 out of 87 locations have been closed indefinitely, just as the region entered its peak tourism season. Security has been ramped up, but the closures have sparked panic and economic disruption in the disputed territory. Meanwhile, tensions have taken a darker turn inside India. In Karnataka, a man was lynched by a mob after allegedly shouting "Pakistan Zindabad" during a local cricket match. Authorities confirmed he died from shock and injuries after being assaulted by spectators who chose mob justice over alerting police. At least a dozen people have been arrested. The incident, which comes amid surging nationalism, has drawn widespread condemnation, with officials calling it brutal and unprecedented.
I was told, it's just a report, that this individual was shouting Pakistan Zindabad and things like that when there was a cricket match going on, a local cricket match. And when they heard this, a few people got together and beat him and all that. That incident has happened, and subsequently, he didn't die on the spot, but they said it's later on he died because of the shock and so on and things like that. But I'm yet to get the actual report, and nearly 10 or 12 people have been arrested, and further investigation is going on. This is at this point of time. So we will definitely take this very seriously, because this kind of things should not happen anywhere, not only in Karnataka, anywhere.
At the International Court of Justice in The Hague, Saudi Arabia's envoy, Mohammed Saad al-Nasser, delivered a scathing denunciation of Israel's ongoing military assault and blockade of Gaza. He described the actions as barbaric and a blatant violation of international law, accusing Israel of employing siege tactics since October 2023 in what he called a campaign of ethnic cleansing. Al-Nasser called on the court to hold Tel Aviv accountable for obstructing humanitarian aid and attacking United Nations facilities.
Israel's hideous conduct, which piles illegality upon illegality, is well documented. Its most ruthless application has been the siege conditions imposed over the Gaza Strip since October 2023. As the entire world is painfully aware, diseases, lack of sanitation, clean water, food, shelter, and medical care is endemic. While temporary respites have occasionally occurred, Israel has reimposed conditions of total blockade at will, just as it did in early March this year, completely halting the provision of food, water, medical supplies, temporary housing.
Echoing those concerns, Egypt's Assistant Foreign Minister, Haytham Kamal Eldon Abdelkader, condemned Israel for forcibly displacing Palestinians to areas equally unsafe and deliberately rendering Gaza uninhabitable. He emphasized that as long as Israel maintains its occupation, it remains bound by international humanitarian and human rights law, and urged the court to ensure it is held responsible for its conduct in the Palestinian territories.
Have forcibly transferred Palestinians to areas no more secure than the places they left, with no access to life-saving supplies and services. Israel is intentionally creating conditions intended to make Gaza uninhabitable. Mr. President, further embodiments of Israel's strategy include the creation of an agency charged with encouraging and managing the deportation of Palestinians from Gaza. Taken together, these practices demonstrate a clear and unified state policy aimed at de-Palestinizing the OPT in grave violation of international law. Mr. President, although this court has established that the continued presence of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory is illegal until such time as the occupation ends, Israel remains bound by its obligations under international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Egypt's participation in the current proceedings stems from our strong belief that the role of this august court and international law and its institutions in protecting the Palestinian people until such time as they can achieve their sovereign independent state based on the June 1967 lines within the framework of the two-state solution.
Further deepening Egypt's position, Jasmine Moussa, a legal advisor at the Egyptian Foreign Ministry, accused Israel of exploiting its military campaign to pursue the removal and extermination of Palestinians under the fog of war. She pointed to the starvation of civilians, the destruction of hospitals, and the continued expansion of settlements as part of a broader strategy aimed at erasing Palestinian self-determination. Moussa argued that no legal or moral justification can support the prolonged siege of Gaza.
Allow me to turn to the second part of Egypt's submission, namely Israel's obligations as an occupying power to ensure and facilitate the unhindered provision of urgently needed supplies as well as humanitarian and development assistance. For decades, the Palestinians in Gaza have endured Israel's land, sea, and air blockades, its border closures, its restrictions on the movement of people and goods, in what has been described as the largest open-air prison in the world. These measures have been found by the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the OPT to constitute a form of collective punishment. As the current siege of Gaza, and the worst yet, enters its 8th consecutive week, Palestinian civilians are facing soaring levels of need. Over 2 million people have been plunged into a man-made famine engineered through the Israeli blockade. With Israel's resumption of its indiscriminate hostilities, no place in Gaza is safe. Reports bring chilling accounts of the deliberate targeting and killing of civilians, whether in so-called humanitarian zones, in refugee camps, in hospitals, in their homes, and while they're waiting for aid. This cruel and callous disregard for human life and dignity is ongoing, even as we stand here in this great hall of justice.
Russia has rejected Ukraine's proposal to extend President Vladimir Putin's upcoming 3-day unilateral ceasefire into a month-long truce, further dimming hopes for a broader peace deal. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov dismissed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's offer to prolong the May 8 to 10th ceasefire, coinciding with Russia's World War II victory celebrations, calling it a manipulation. Peskov argued that Kyiv had not provided a direct response to Moscow's gesture of goodwill and insisted that broader questions must be addressed before considering a long-term ceasefire. Zelensky criticized Putin's short truce as performative and reiterated Ukraine's support for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire proposed by the United States. The White House, showing growing frustration, has pressured Moscow to halt hostilities. President Trump publicly urged Putin to stop shooting and sign a deal, accusing the Russian leader of stalling. Russia launched 100 drones overnight into Ukrainian territory, with deadly strikes reported in Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv, and drone debris sparking fires in Kyiv. Ukraine also targeted Russia's Belgorod region, where a drone reportedly hit a civilian vehicle, killing 2. The Russian military claimed to have intercepted 40 drones, including several over occupied Crimea. Border regions on both sides remain volatile, with civilians increasingly bearing the brunt of ongoing hostilities. Mark Carney's Liberal Party has secured a 4th consecutive term in Canada's national elections, a victory largely shaped by U.S. President Donald Trump's aggressive trade policies and provocative rhetoric. Though falling short of an outright majority with 168 seats in the 343-seat House of Commons, the Liberals outpaced the Conservatives, who were projected to win 144 seats. Carney's campaign framed Trump's threats, including his suggestion that Canada become America's 51st state, as an existential challenge, rallying Canadians around a message of sovereignty and unity. In his victory speech, Carney warned that America wants our land, our resources, our water, vowing that Canada would never submit. International reactions were swift and supportive, particularly from European leaders who emphasized shared democratic values and multilateral cooperation. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen praised the strong Canada-Europe bond, while French President Emmanuel Macron called Carney a symbol of strength amid global uncertainty. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte also expressed eagerness to deepen defense and economic cooperation. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked Canada for its leadership in supporting Ukraine, affirming a continued partnership in the pursuit of global peace and security. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi referenced shared democratic values despite strained relations, while China's foreign ministry indicated openness to improving relations with Canada based on mutual respect. Former U.S. President Joe Biden, in contrast to Trump's silence, congratulated Carney and expressed confidence in continued U.S.-Canada alignment. As Canada's political landscape shifts under Carney's leadership, global partners appear eager to reinforce alliances amid rising geopolitical uncertainty. Spain and Portugal have restored power after suffering their worst-ever blackout, but questions remain over what triggered the massive outage. On Monday, roughly 60% of Spain's electricity demand vanished in just 5 seconds, leaving trains halted, commuters stranded, and communications down. Traffic lights, schools, and metro systems are now gradually returning to normal. Spain's grid operator, REE, ruled out a cyber attack but blamed 2 likely failures at solar plants in the southwest for destabilizing the grid and cutting interconnection with France. The High Court is investigating the possibility of a terrorist act, and Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has urged patience, saying all causes are still on the table. 3 people died in Galicia after using a generator to power a medical device during the outage. Emergency services were deployed across the country, and in Madrid, officials handed out supplies to stranded travelers. Energy experts warned that without improvements in infrastructure and grid balance, such blackouts could happen again.